Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F-words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Streamed and Screened, an entertainment podcast about movies and TV from Lee Enterprises. I'm Terry Lipshetz, managing editor of the National Newsroom at Lee, and co-host of the program with Bruce Miller, editor of the Sioux City Journal and a longtime entertainment reporter. We're talking journalism this week, right? I mean, this is about us.
You know, the thing is, I have been waiting for The Paper, which is a comedy done by the people who did The Office. I've been waiting for this thing for the longest time because I'm dying to see how they attack the newspaper business, our business, right? We love to watch ourselves. We love to talk about ourselves. We love to reward ourselves. But you're thinking, how does somebody from the outside view us? And I've been waiting for this and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Finally, I got it. All 10 episodes I've already gone through. And I realized that they're not necessarily doing the newspaper that I know. They're doing a newspaper. So some of the things that we see as issues or things that might, raise our interest are not necessarily part of theirs. And that's okay. That's fine. But if you were expecting Dunder Mifflin in your local newspaper, it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
The series revolves around the Toledo Truth Teller, which is owned by a larger corporation. And they're putting in a new editor. The new editor used to work in the corporation that owns the company. So he has a sense of what the corporation is all about, but he hasn't been in a newspaper since he was in college. So he's coming in and he realizes that this wasn't the beautiful dream he once had, where everybody is, rushing to get a story and it's deadline pressure and they're, stop the presses and all that stuff. No, it's not like that at all. In fact, he doesn't have much of a staff. He finds out he has really one reporter, somebody who designs the pages or pastes them up. And then he has a managing editor who really doesn't care that much about what's going on. So he's got to try and create a paper. I think it's more about creating a paper than it is looking in on a paper. And that's where it gets it's fun because he asks for volunteers. Now, have you ever had that at a newspaper where you say, who here would like to volunteer to be a reporter?
Well, I've sat in on enough. I've sat in on enough meetings with the legal department to know that we can't do that. We need to actually pay people for their work. So, that's just like a weird premise to me to begin with. I get it for a comedic value type of thing, sure, but I don't understand why people would want to just volunteer to be journalists.
Well, and
it'd be like, do you want to volunteer to be an accountant? No.
Right. Well, but how do they get that work done and then go do journalism?
Right.
I don't see how that works. And then, it's typical of most things that are about the business is that they all are working on one story.
Yeah.
And, we can't all work on one story. We have to have more than one story to put in the paper. And so that, you see the disconnects, but it's still fun to see quirky people who work at the paper.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way it always is? I think we
hmm
are the quirky people at the paper. But
Yes.
and then some of the things that you worry about, like the little things that become big problems. The vending machine doesn't work, and this becomes a crisis, or nobody made the coffee in the morning. Those are things that we relate to. But
Right.
the journalism aspect of it, I think it's going to take a while for them to get to that point.
Yeah.
There's a cute episode early on, so I'm not spoiling anything. This is not a spoiler, but a group of students from a local school come over to shadow the truth teller people. And
hmm
they realize that the kids know more than they do about the business. So yeah, it's cute. Domhnall Gleeson, and you've seen him in some Star Wars films.
Oh, sure.
Um,
Right.
he's
Yep.
been in a lot. In fact, he was the one who held Steve Carell hostage in that. I think was it a Hulu or an FX series where yeah, it didn't end well, but he was evil in that. But he's the editor coming in, and very naive in a lot of ways, and fun, lots of fun.
Sure. Okay.
When you get to like toward the end of the series, you will think, "Oh my God, I love him. He's great. He's a wonderful editor." But it does take a while. But then that got me thinking, okay, so then if this wasn't my favorite journalism show, what is?
Mm,
And television has hit and missed a lot of times. They've had a lot
right.
of journalism. Like, do you remember the one most recently where it was Not Dead Yet? It was about an obit writer.
I didn't see that one. No.
Well, she worked all week long on one obituary.
Oh,
Do you
that's
know any
not.
place that has this happen? No.
No, I would actually have a problem with any reporter working on one story for an entire week, unless it's like a deep dive investigative type of thing.
And those, you better be really sure you want to do it,
Yes. Yeah. No, I
right?
mean, I came up as a sports reporter, and it was common for me to write 3 or 4 stories in a day, not one in a week.
Right, right. But and
Yes.
you think you're lazy if you don't produce. And then,
Correct.
I've had reporters come in and say, "Now, what are our quotas? How many do we have to write?" Because in my
Yeah.
last paper, I had to write X number of stories a day.
Right.
And you think, wow, that's interesting. We don't have a quota, but we certainly keep track of, who's producing and who's not, you
Yeah,
know?
it's easy to. I mean, obviously, every story is different, and one story that's a little bit more in depth might be the same as somebody putting in the time of 3 shorter stories that can be a little bit, would you consider more of a quick churn type of thing. Yeah, so you don't always want to put a quota on things. You just as an editor, you kind of know what's in the ballpark of like
You know,
productive.
we had a sports editor here who was always laughing on the nights of elections.
Oh yeah.
Because he said, "You guys, oh, you get so excited and you're doing all this stuff on one night. We have an election every night in sports."
Yep. Yeah.
And, it really is. It's you've got to get it done by a certain time. You've got to get it turned around. I think the biggest change, and they do notice this in this series, is that because we all have earlier deadlines, some of that later stuff doesn't get in print the next day.
Right.
So those things are becoming an online. We've got to get that online right away. And it's still the same process, but it's a different method of sharing the information. So yeah, you
Right.
see what
Right.
happens with all that. But
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up the sports connection though too, because I remember one of the sports departments. I don't know if I worked for it or if I just knew someone who worked in one of these departments. They had a sign up in their sports department that says like every night is election night in sports. Where's our pizza? Because the big thing in journalism is on election night, we're buying pizza for the staff because it's busy. We got all this work
right,
to do. And they're like, we should be getting pizza every night because it's
right.
election night every night. But and you know what, I've been on both ends of it now. They're two different beasts. Yes, sports is very busy, but there's also times in sports which is very, very dead. It's called the summer when nothing happens. So there's like, trust me, for as like busy as it can be during high school football or college football season, there's a lot of like quiet weeks in sports departments in June and July and into August.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
you could do a journalism a story, series,
Right.
movie, whatever,
Yeah.
that would make people who are in the business feel like, oh my God, they captured it, unless you were
Yeah.
doing their story. And even then, they have to, it's boring work for a lot of times because
Yeah.
you're researching, you're interviewing, you're trying to group things, you're trying to write, that doesn't translate well. So that's why they
Right.
have to lean into one story or one kind of issue that people all go at. So it's a little more welcoming, if that's the term I
Right.
want to use. Do you
Yeah.
remember Lou Grant? Did you ever watch Lou Grant?
Uh, I mean, I watched bits and pieces of the Mary Tyler Moore show. I probably caught a little Lou Grant at some point, but it was a little before my time.
Okay. Well, Lou Grant, I mean, that was a great transition going from a comedy to a drama.
Right.
And they took one character and then they surrounded him with really good people. So you got a chance to see the reporter at work, the photographer at work, the publisher who was very demanding on the editor. I mean, I thought that captured the experience a little better than some of these other ones do.
Yeah.
But
There's
now we've had big movies too that mess with
Yeah.
it.
There's two shows that I wanted to bring up in this that I thought did a fairly good job at capturing journalism. One was a Netflix series a couple of years ago. What was it called? Becoming Anna.
Okay,
Or
yeah.
Inventing Anna. Do you remember that one? It was on
I do.
Netflix. It was about Anna Delvey, but it was based on the reporting in New York Magazine. And I thought that was a I've never really worked in magazines, so it's a little bit of a different pace, but I thought it did a fairly good job at capturing journalism, and it was an entertaining show. The other one that I really liked, and I was very disappointed when it got canceled after season 1, was Alaska Daily with
Yeah, Hilary
Hilary
Swank.
Swank.
Yeah.
Yeah. And was it the best TV show, best drama ever? No. I thought it was a very serviceable drama, but I thought from a journalism perspective, it actually captured the modern newsroom really well
Right.
because it got into things like, you know, we don't have enough reporters. Our deadlines are all out of whack. We're watching the metrics of stories on the big board. It really captured, I think, small community journalism and some of the struggles. Like I get what this new comedy is trying to do, but I think if you really want to capture or get a sense for what is going on in a modern newsroom, Alaska Daily did a really
Right.
good job at capturing that. And the funny thing about this, and I think I mentioned to you this previously, is I actually knew several people that worked for I guess it was the Anchorage Daily News, or one of those papers that is loosely connected to it in real life. I was in there's a organization that's called the Pointer Institute. It's based in Florida. It's kind of a workshopping,
Sure.
educational, for those that don't know, for journalists. So you go down to the Pointer Institute, you might take some classes, you might be involved in a program. And I was in a year-long program where, we all went down to Tampa, we met, we started our project for a year, and then a year later we met back down there. And when we started, in our group was the publisher, the editor, and a few reporters from the paper in Anchorage. And it was kind of like the editor there was the editor that was loosely based on this TV show.
Oh, wow.
It was really fascinating. And their owner was their owner of their paper was married to David Rubenstein at the time, or had just been
Okay.
divorced from David, right?
Sure.
And I think she used the money from like the divorce, or I don't remember exactly what the story was, but she was very well off because of her marriage to David Rubenstein, and bought the paper with really good intentions. But by the time we met a year later, she'd already sold off the paper. And that
Oh,
really, like, again, when you look at what some of the topics that were covered in Alaska Daily and the struggles and the publisher and ownership changes. A lot of these things were addressed. And I thought that show did a really good job and was a solid effort in capturing real life modern journalism.
Well, I liked when they'd go to somebody's house to interview them, and then they shut the door on them, and they go, "No,
Yeah.
I don't want to talk." And
Yeah.
that you do find all the time is that
Oh yeah.
you're met with resistance. Today, what we see even more is that people think we have an agenda, that we're coming
Right.
into this to promote this or that or whatever, and that's not the way real journalism operates,
Correct.
you know?
Right.
So, when they get things right, it's great to celebrate it.
Mhm.
But I don't think you're with this show, I don't think let's all lean in on this because I
Yeah.
don't think it is that. And you get to see a character from The Office in there,
Mhm.
who is part of their process. So that's kind of fun. But enjoy it for what it is. It's not all newspapers, it's the paper.
Okay. Yeah. So
Now, but
movies.
then there are movies too that have done it, and
Yeah.
I think movies have done it better. You know,
Yes. I would agree. Um,
Spotlight won Best Picture, and it
Probably the best journalism film. Well, I think you can argue a few different films here, but I think Spotlight. There's two that I think are kind of like the gold standard of journalism movies. One would be Spotlight, and then of course the other being All the President's Men.
and, when was the last time you watched All the President's Men?
It's been a few years. It's one of those films. I read the book I've probably seen the movie a dozen times over the years. It's one of those that I'll pop in. You kind of like feeling like, why am I still doing this kind of thing? And then
Right.
you watch All the President's Men, you're like, that's why I'm doing this, right?
Yeah, it's
Because
very
it does inspire you. Yeah.
it's inspirational. I think it's slower than you may remember, because I've
Yeah.
seen it in recent times, and I think, "Oh, god, this is really dragging, isn't it?" But at the time, it seemed so immediate, and everything was happening. I remember going to the Watergate Hotel, staying at the
Hmm.
Watergate Hotel,
Oh,
and
yeah.
thinking, "Oh, do you suppose where was this room? I gotta find," I was like, that's how nutty I was about All the President's Men. But I think they did a great job. I think they, at the time, captured what journalism was about. And when they were
Yeah.
taking real garbage from the Washington Post and using it for set decorating, okay, you're really trying as hard as you can to make this work. It's fun to watch it now though, where Dustin Hoffman is typing his story and like the other one's looking over his shoulder and you're going, typing? Typing? What is this? And somebody else is giving you other words and we're going to just erase them and do what are we doing with this? So
Right.
it's very old school. But Spotlight is more within our realm. And I think that does show when you do a big project, how it takes legwork. You're not just going to have it show up on your desk and something you just run it.
Right.
You've got to
Right.
dig. And the odd thing is that the information they were looking for was right where they are.
Yeah.
It
Right.
didn't take a huge search. But now, if you think back, if we're talking, journalism movies, Citizen Kane was a journalism movie.
Yeah.
He was,
I'm trying to
it's not
think.
it's
Man,
not
did
a
I
world
watch
we
that one?
know,
Right.
but that was interesting. His Girl Friday was another one that got people excited about journalism because, the
Yeah.
fast talking, come on, give me a
Right.
rewrite and all that kind of stuff. I wish that were the case. I have never seen that, but I think all of them lose sight of the fact that there are great friendships that are formed among people who probably wouldn't be friends with each other in other circumstances. Terry, just you and me talking, how would I have known you? And journalism
Right.
brought us together. And
Yeah.
I think that's the cool thing about this is you get to meet other people. And that's what I think the joy is of doing journalism is you get to meet other people, hear other voices, hear what their feelings are, what their thoughts are about things.
Hmm.
And it's like a constant learning process for us.
Yeah. It's really interesting the people you come in contact with, the people that you meet. I worked with a guy for a while who is doing tours of the Jersey Shore, showing the
Where they
old stops of
lived?
Bruce Springsteen, you know. I worked with another guy who he was a sports editor of a paper, a small paper. He's now the editor in chief of NHL.com. I worked with another guy who's a very well-known music critic now, and he's been on a lot of these big documentaries that have been on H. He was on the Billy Joel one recently. It's just like fascinating some of the people, and I was even thinking about like some of the people who I've met over the years. Like I met John Bon Jovi.
Right.
I've met a lot of notable sports figures. I was in a interview situation with Derek Jeter. I met two Wisconsin governors. I met the former Speaker of the House. It's you come across a lot of interesting people just from doing this job, and it's really like your perceptions of people. Forgetting about like, are you a Democrat or a Republican or this, that, or the other? Some of the people who may not have your same political beliefs, you'll meet them in real life and you're like, this is a normal person. I could hang
Right.
out and have beers with this person. And then you meet somebody who's maybe a little bit more aligned with you on politics, and you're like, I can't get out of the room fast enough with this person. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
The personalities.
When we were having the caucuses, we got to see all of them in their early days of, campaigning. Because
Right.
Iowa would be a state where they would test the waters. And
Yeah.
you'd see these ones, and some really had no clue about the people that they were talking to. I mean,
Right.
they were playing a game, they were playing a role, they were propped up by people who told them this is what you've got to do or this is what you've got to say. And I remember I've interviewed every president back to Jimmy Carter.
Well,
So you can see where, that's I think a real cool thing in my life. But
yeah.
getting the candidates, you get a lot of them. And you have the ones that are very kind of shy, and you think they're running for president and they're
Mhm.
shy. I can't believe this. You should be, eager to talk to people. Or ones that
Right.
are on the phone in the front of your office building, dealing with some kind of personal scandal. And that we
Right.
had, and that was interesting to see. But the one who impressed me the most now, and this has nothing to do with politics, because I uh, I really thought that Hillary Clinton was an interesting campaign person because she
Mhm.
didn't just go to the editorial board and talk to the editorial board people, which is normally what we have them do. They come into the
Right.
office, they talk with the editorial board, and you get a chance to kind of feel them out and see what they're like. She went to everybody in the office and she shook hands with everybody, and she was just really fun, I thought. And I didn't think any of that came through when she was campaigning. I thought
Hmm.
she was very stiff in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
but as a person just dealing with people, she was like somebody I could work with. I think I could
Yeah.
have fun with her. And
Wow.
those are
Yeah,
the things
that's
we get the option of seeing.
right.
And, it's strange when we have dead people, celebrities, people will come to me and say, "Did you ever interview this person?" And chances are good that I have interviewed everybody at some point.
Right.
And what you remember is the thing that you remember from that day. This person was a real jerk and they were doing this. And so
Right.
that's what comes into your mind, not anything else that's colored it since or before.
Yeah.
But yeah. So journalism gets you a window onto a world that's like no other. And
Right.
it's a great way to tell a story
Mhm.
because we deal with stories all the time. We have to
Yeah.
produce stories. So we know the beginning, the middle, and the end. We know that this has to have some kind of structure. And I think
Yeah.
that's why the movies like that, is because there's structure to the film.
Right.
Does that
Right.
make sense? I hope
Yeah,
so.
I agree. I
But
agree.
there've been
Uh,
really stupid films. Well, now, most recently this year, we had, Superman, and Superman goes
oh,
into their kind of futuristic newsroom, and I thought, "God, they have a lot of TV screens in their newsroom. Aren't they not working? Are they all looking at the screens?" You know?
yeah. Right.
So so that's how that
Yeah.
goes. But other films, and if we go into other kinds of journalism, broadcast, for example, Network is my all-time favorite movie. And I
Mhm.
love the idea that it seems so bizarre and yet it's become so true.
Right.
Even though in
Yeah.
76, I think it was, this seemed
Mhm.
like a fantasy and they just followed the game plan, that's all.
Yeah.
But
There's been some really depressing ones too, like The Killing Fields,
yes, yes.
Salvador. I mean, these really can get into it's not journalism can be a very difficult career. I mean, if you're it's one thing to be a domestic reporter, but if you're going into a war situation, it's survival for folks. You look but on the flip of it, then you look at The Paper, which has nothing to do with the
Right,
new TV show,
right.
but it was a comedy that was based, in New York in kind of like a tabloid newsroom. It's one of my favorite movies. It took some liberties, I think, with the profession, um, but I thought it was very well done, and it was a fun watch for me. I don't know. Do you like that one?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Michael
The
Keaton?
Post
Yeah.
the Post is another one that I liked.
Oh, yeah.
Another look at the Washington Post and their
Yep.
experiences. But, like I say, they get pieces of it right. I
Yeah.
don't think we can hold them to the fire and say, "You've gotta get it all right," because that's not how it is, you know? Um,
Right.
the other thing I find that people don't realize is that oftentimes we don't become friendly with people outside of the office because we want to keep that distance if we're covering them. You know what I mean?
Right.
We would be
Mhm.
very likely to be friends with politicians because
Mhm.
we're opinionated, they're opinionated, we have ideas, we want to share ideas, but you find
Yeah.
yourself pulling away from that because you say, now this somebody could think that I'm, being curried to be giving them good publicity or whatever. And
Mhm.
so they don't realize that today people just think we're in the bag for anybody, and that's not it.
Right.
So as a result, our friendships often exist in the newsroom.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting just even having to, from an ethics standpoint, having to be careful with what we do because we have the perception. I know our elected county prosecutor. Her daughter, I coached in basketball. She goes to middle school and now high school with my daughters. So I know our county prosecutor very well. And I was out, watching a sporting event one day, and she's handing out a petition to get back on the ballot for the
Ah,
last election.
I
And I'm
can't
like,
sound it.
and I'm like, Yeah, I was like, I respectfully cannot sign it. I wish you luck in your quest for office. She ended up running unopposed, so as it was, it really didn't matter anyway. But it's those are the little awkward situations that come up. I mean, I even remember being out with my family. For those that aren't aware, Wisconsin had a very contentious situation 12, 14 years ago where the governor, Scott Walker at the time, was, putting into place with Republicans and union, with teachers and stuff, policies. They were trying to cut back on collective bargaining. My wife is a teacher. My parents and my wife signed petitions to recall the
Sure.
governor, and I'm like, you do what you want to do. I can't sign that. That's not something that I can't get politically active. I mean, we can't
Well, or you
put
have somebody
we
that
can't
says,
put
"Can we
lawn signs on during
right,
or during an election.
can I put
It's
a sign in
we
your lawn?" And you go, "No, you cannot." "Can I
yeah
give you a,
right.
a button to wear or a sticker to wear?" "No, you cannot."
No, you
And
cannot.
sometimes people don't get that. They don't
No,
understand that we're trying to maintain this distance. And
correct.
what we tell reporters too, if you're not covering that area of things, you can be friendly with those people. There's no problem with that. But be careful if you are reporting about people that you somehow
Right.
see socially, because it could end up being
Correct.
compromising.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, so
it's
it
interesting too, just even from like I'm working sports now again for our company. And one thing that I have issue with, and I know certain news organizations have things in place about this, but not all do, is reporters voting for things. So for instance, you'll have reporters who are members of the Baseball Writers Association of America. They vote for who should be into the Hall of Fame, right? They vote for, some of them vote for awards like Most Valuable Player or the Cy Young Award. Some media organizations allow their sports reporters to vote for those things. Some, I know, I'm pretty sure the New York Times does not allow their reporters to vote in these. I read a story the other day, so I know for a fact that the Los Angeles Times does not allow their reporters. But the reasoning there is thinking like, well, if you're voting for the Heisman Trophy, if you're voting for somebody to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame, you are part of creating the story. But journalists, as a journalist, you're supposed to be an observer. You're supposed to be taking note. You're supposed to be reporting on it. So there is an interesting
but
um
wouldn't a reporter be more knowledgeable about somebody
that's
who would
kind
deserve
of
that?
so that right. So that's kind of the, you can argue it in both directions. Me personally, if I was the sports editor of a newsroom, I would not allow my reporters to vote for any of those things. So, you take like the argument of, let's say, the uh baseball, the Hall of Fame. You could create a committee of retired sports reporters of
Sure.
of of other people. You can make committees. You can find people who can vote for these things who would be more objective than a journalist would be. And I understand, like, the beat reporters, they're covering these things. They follow the teams. They are experts. And I'm not doubting that they're not experts, because they are the experts. But I would just go back to my early days of being a reporter and being in an awkward situation where I was asked to come up with, an all area team for a high school. And, you pick one kid over another, and I can tell you, coach of their kid that doesn't get picked isn't happy, and they will yell at you on the phone for a very long time. So it's like creating the news, being a reporter that creates and interjects themselves in the news. It can be complicated.
Well, and sometimes you have those columnists who are designed
Right.
to stir the pot, but
And
they're
that's
not
and that's
covering
a
the
little bit different. Right.
yeah, they're not covering the day-to-day stuff, so they don't see those
Mhm.
people. So you can easily say, well, I cover the stories only. I do
Right.
not write his column.
Yes.
And then I think when you separate church and state like that, it
Yep.
makes it a lot easier for everybody.
Right.
They can get
Right.
mad at him.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah,
It
if we want to make a list of the best football players in the area, well, we're going to have that content first.
Right.
So we would run the story, and then we'll deal with the fallout after that. But
It is. It's a tricky thing, and I don't know if there's actually a right answer for that. It's just, it's like a personal opinion. I've been on both. Like years ago, if you asked 25-year-old Terry about whether or not a reporter should vote for the Heisman Trophy or Baseball
he'd
Writers
say
Hall of Fame,
yes.
yes. But having moved from sports into news, and now kind of like I bridged the line now because I handle both news and sports in my current job. Um, I have a different perspective, and I don't think it's a right answer or a wrong answer. It's just that's my current opinion, and if I'm ever in charge of a newsroom and have to make that decision, I will. But we're not there.
Well, it's like politics, where if you're that vocal about some issue or whatever, maybe you should
Right.
get out of journalism and go into
Yes.
politics. That
Yeah.
could be your answer for that.
Yeah. Go work for the Democratic Party. Go work for the Republican Party. Go
Yeah,
work for a third party. Whatever. If that's your passion, it's probably time to leave journalism and move on to other things.
right. There's a place for everybody, and they all could
Yep.
use good people.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Absolutely.
it's interesting. What I find, okay, I'm going back to the paper now,
Yes.
that they think that people can just volunteer to do this
Mhm.
job. It is not a volunteer job at all. You really need
Right.
training, because everybody, I think, is so savvy these days about the media that they know better and they know what they're doing, and you need to have some kind of grounding that helps you through that kind of that landmine of things that are going on. So
Yeah.
say what it is, but there we are.
All right. Well, on that note,
But
we
watch
will move
it,
into
Terry. I
other
want you to
territory.
watch it. Yeah, I want you to watch the paper and
Okay.
let me know what you think. But I'm getting you set up for the idea that it's not a look at all newspapers.
Correct.
In fact, this one is probably very unique. And I've never seen a managing editor who really doesn't do anything. No, but that she is more interested in her own, how she comes off than how the paper comes off.
There
Maybe I've
you
seen
go.
that too. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it's fun. There are a fun bunch of characters that are pulled together. And I think it really lights up when those high school kids come to the paper.
I will look it out, and I will check it out soon. So, but no, it was a good discussion. It's always fun to talk our profession, and thank you all for listening. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of Streamed and Screened.